I took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of my burgundy dress as I stood backstage at the luxurious Bellevue Manor. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my best friend Bianca's life, but a knot had formed in the pit of my stomach. As the maid of honor, I was expected to give a heartfelt speech celebrating her marriage to Tristan, a man from one of the city's most elite families. Bianca and I had been inseparable since we met in kindergarten, our bond transcending the vast divide between our social classes. While her parents showered her with every privilege money could buy, my single mother Diane worked tirelessly as a waitress to provide for us. Despite our differences, Bianca had been my closest confidant through all the challenges life threw my way. That was until Tristan came into the picture. From the moment I met him, his condescending attitude made it clear that he viewed me as beneath them. At the rehearsal dinner last night, he had made snide remarks about my modest background, and Bianca did nothing to defend me. The true colors of her materialistic nature finally revealing themselves. As I stepped onto the stage, the opulent ballroom filled with Tristan's affluent guests, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in this world of wealth and privilege. Bianca beamed at me expectantly, oblivious to the rift her actions had caused in our once unbreakable bond. Clearing my throat, I began, "Bianca and I have been friends since we were children, navigating life's ups and downs together." My voice trailed off as I noticed Tristan whispering something in Bianca's ear, her expression shifting from joy to disdain. In that moment, I realized this was no longer about celebrating a union. It was a deliberate attempt to humiliate me. Bianca leaned over, her perfectly painted lips curling into a smirk as she uttered the words that would forever shatter our friendship. "En français, s'il vous plaît." My heart pounded in my chest as Bianca's words hung in the air like a slap to the face. "En français, s'il vous plaît." In French, please. I should have seen this coming from the woman who had so easily discarded our lifetime of friendship at the first hint of wealth and status. Tristan's smug grin only fueled the fire burning within me. I refused to be humiliated and diminished by these privileged snobs who viewed me as some uncultured commoner unworthy of their elitist circle. Straightening my shoulders, I met Bianca's challenging gaze head-on. "Bien sûr, mon ami," I replied smoothly in perfect French, relishing the way her eyebrows shot up in surprise. I launched into a fluent speech, sharing anecdotes from our childhood that highlighted Bianca's true nature, the selfish, materialistic girl who would discard anyone or anything that didn't elevate her social standing. With each biting remark, her perfectly composed facade crumbled. But I didn't stop there. Switching effortlessly to Spanish, then Mandarin, I exposed how she had abandoned the values instilled in us by my mother, a woman who sacrificed everything to provide for her family with dignity and integrity. Tears streamed down Bianca's face as I laid bare the ugliness of her betrayal for all to witness. Tristan's face was beet red, his eyes bulging with rage at having his intended humiliation so spectacularly backfire. As I concluded my speech to a stunned silence, I leveled my gaze at the mismatched pair. I may not have been born into privilege, but at least I possess something money can't buy: self-respect. With that parting shot, I turned on my heel and stormed out, the thunderous applause from the waitstaff ringing in my ears. In that moment, I shed the dead weight of a toxic friendship, finally free from Bianca's venom. Tears streamed down my face as I burst through the front door of our modest apartment, the adrenaline from the confrontation rapidly giving way to a crushing sense of loss and betrayal. My mother Diane rushed out from the kitchen, her face etched with concern. "Raina, honey, what happened?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me as I sobbed into her shoulder. Through hiccuping breaths, I recounted the events of Bianca's wedding, the snide remarks, the deliberate humiliation, and my decision to finally stand up to their cruelty with a multilingual speech that left them disgraced. Diane's expression hardened as she listened, her grip on me tightening. "Those stuck-up jerks had no right to treat you like that," she spat out, the venom in her voice startling me. My mother, who had endured so much hardship while raising me alone, was usually the embodiment of grace under pressure. Gently cupping my face in her calloused hands, she looked me square in the eyes. "You did the right thing, Mija. I'm proud of you for having the courage to defend yourself and not let them make you feel small." I nodded, fresh tears welling up as her words sank in. All my life, Diane had instilled in me the values of integrity, hard work, and self-respect, qualities that ultimately gave me the strength to confront Bianca and Tristan's vicious behavior. But what now? I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. Bianca was my best friend since we were kids, and who knows what kind of professional fallout I'll face after publicly humiliating the heir to the Pemberton fortune. Diane's expression softened as she brushed a stray hair from my face. That girl stopped being your friend a long time ago. Maybe you just didn't want to see it. She sighed deeply, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. When I was about your age, I had a friend who came from money, the kind of wealth that made the Pembertons look middle class. At first, she seemed sweet and down to earth, but the more her family's fortune grew, the more insufferable she became. I listened with rapt attention, realizing this was the first time my mother had opened up about her past. She gave me a rueful smile. One day, she made a snide comment about how I'd never amount to anything more than a waitress. That's when I realized our friendship was based on her looking down on me, not seeing me as an equal. Squeezing my hands, her eyes bored into mine with an intensity I'd never seen before. I cut her out of my life that day, and you know what? It was one of the most liberating decisions I ever made. Sometimes we have to prune the dead branches to allow new growth, Mija. Her words were like a soothing balm on the raw wound of Bianca's betrayal. With my mother's quiet strength bolstering me, I straightened my shoulders and blinked away the last of my tears. The pain was still there, but Diane had reignited the fire of determination within me. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would persevere and forge my own path, just as my mother had done all those years ago when she walked away from the toxicity that threatened to diminish her. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, I would spread my wings and soar. The next few weeks passed in a blur as I tried to push past the lingering sting of Bianca's betrayal. My mother's words had been a beacon of strength, reminding me that I didn't need toxic people in my life, no matter how long I'd known them. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of dread as the Pemberton-Sutcliffe wedding reception loomed. Part of me had toyed with the idea of skipping it altogether after the humiliation at the rehearsal dinner, but a bigger part, the part fueled by my mother's resilience, refused to back down. As I stepped into the opulent ballroom on the arm of my best guy friend Carlos, I immediately locked eyes with Bianca across the crowded room. Her icy glare cut right through me, daring me to cause another scene on her special day. Refusing to be intimidated, I held my chin high and made my way to our assigned table near the front. Carlos gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, his presence providing a welcome buffer against the hostile stares from Tristan's snobbish family members. The first half of the reception passed without incident, as the newly minted Mr. and Mrs. Sutcliffe made their rounds greeting guests. But just as the first course was being cleared, a hush fell over the room as Bianca clinked her champagne glass for attention. "If I could have everyone's attention," she began in an overly saccharine tone that immediately set me on edge. "It's time for the maid of honor speech from my dear, dear friend Raina." She shot me a sickly sweet smile, her eyes glittering with malice. "And since we have guests from all over the world joining us today, I think it's only fitting that she delivers it in French." My blood turned to ice in my veins as I realized this was another calculated attempt to demean me in front of her pretentious social circle. Tristan leaned back in his chair, a cruel smirk playing across his lips as he awaited my embarrassment. But just like that fateful day, I refused to be their punchline. Slowly rising to my feet, I cleared my throat and began speaking in my flawless French. "Merci, Bianca, for this opportunity." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the stunned audience before switching to fluent Spanish, "to share some insight into the beautiful bride we're celebrating today." From there, I launched into an impassioned retelling of Bianca's despicable treatment of me, someone who had considered her a sister in all but blood. With each new language I effortlessly transitioned into, a hush gradually fell over the captivated crowd. By the time I was weaving between Mandarin, Russian, and Arabic with masterful ease, even Bianca's cellared composure had shattered as she gaped at me in horror. Tears of rage streamed down her blotchy face, but I was too far into my cadence to be deterred. So while we admire the material trappings of wealth surrounding us today, I declared in a booming voice, switching back to English for maximum impact, let's not forget the most precious jewel of all: loyalty and the ability to see value in something besides price tags. The room erupted in thunderous applause as I locked eyes with Bianca one last time, allowing the full weight of her treachery to wash over her. In that moment, she knew she had awoken a force to be reckoned with, and there would be a reckoning. As I took my seat amid congratulatory pats on the back, I caught Tristan's enraged expression and felt a surge of satisfaction. The high road could wait. For now, I would bask in the ashes of the privilege they had tried and failed to lord over me. The aftermath of my speech at the wedding reception was like a nuclear blast rippling through the upper echelons of high society. As I strode out of the ballroom amid a chorus of shocked gasps, I could feel the weight of 1,000 judgmental stares boring into my back. But I didn't care. For too long, I had allowed Bianca's cruelty and Tristan's arrogance to make me feel small and insignificant. No more. It was only when I reached the valet stand and the reality of being utterly alone hit me that the first tendril of doubt began to creep in. What now? I had burned every bridge with the Sutcliffe-Pemberton clan, but at what cost? My phone buzzed incessantly as I slid into a taxi, no doubt a barrage of scathing messages from the very people I had so publicly excoriate. Gritting my teeth, I powered it off, the weight in the pit of my stomach growing heavier with each passing block. By the time I arrived at my apartment, I was physically and emotionally drained. I barely had a chance to collapse onto the couch before my mother emerged from the kitchen, her brow furrowed with concern. "Mija, I saw the news," she began cautiously, taking a seat beside me. "They're saying you caused quite a scene at the wedding." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat as the events of the night came crashing back in full force. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I recounted every agonizing detail to my mother. Bianca's cruel attempt at public humiliation, my impassioned multilingual counterattack, and the shocking culmination of it all. To her credit, Diane didn't interrupt, simply wrapping her arms around me as I purged the toxic emotions that had been swirling inside. When I finally fell silent, she cupped my face in her calloused hands, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, Mija," she said softly. "But part of me worries about what this will mean for your future." My heart clenched at the unspoken question. Had I gone too far? Allowed my anger to jeopardize everything I'd worked so hard for? A wave of nausea washed over me as I imagined the potential ramifications of so publicly humiliating the heir to the Pemberton Empire. As if on cue, my phone began buzzing again with an incessant stream of calls and texts. This time I didn't silence it, instead glancing at the caller ID to see it was my boss, Marcus Kingsley, calling from Kingsley United. With shaking hands, I answered, bracing for the axe to fall. "Raina," his gruff voice barked without preamble. "I don't know what the hell happened at that wedding, but I just got a call from the Pemberton family demanding your immediate termination." My heart plummeted into my stomach as I cast a despairing look at my mother. This was it, the consequences I had been dreading. "Effective immediately, you're fired from Kingsley United," Marcus continued, his words like a kick to the gut. "Don't bother coming in to clean out your desk. Security will have your things sent over." The line went dead, and I dropped the phone in stunned disbelief. Tears flowed freely as I collapsed against my mother, my body racked with heaving sobs. In one fell swoop, I had lost my best friend, my job, my entire life as I knew it. Diane simply held me close, her own cheeks stained with sympathetic tears as we clung to each other amid the smoldering wreckage of my world. In that moment of anguish, I couldn't see any path forward from the ashes. But my mother had walked through fire before. And if her resilience was a spark within my soul, I knew that soon I too would rise again. In the days following my abrupt firing from Kingsley United, I cycled through the 5 stages of grief like a tornado ripping through a trailer park. There were moments of denial where I convinced myself it was all an elaborate misunderstanding that could be resolved. Then came the anger, a blinding white-hot rage that had me hurling objects across the apartment and screaming expletives at the universe for the injustice of it all. How dare they punish me for standing up to that pretentious prick, Tristan, and his backstabbing bride, Bianca? Bargaining was next as I desperately tried to appeal to former colleagues and connections, grasping at any potential lifeline. But the Pemberton influence ran deep, and it became clear that anyone associated with me was at risk of being blacklisted. For a while, depression settled in like a dark cloud, feeding the negative voice in my head that insisted I had squandered every opportunity through my hot-headed actions. I stopped returning calls, stopped looking for new jobs, stopped getting out of bed most days. It was my mother's tough love that finally shook me from my spiral. Diane barged into my room one morning, yanking the covers off me with no warning. "Enough wallowing," she barked in her no-nonsense tone. "You had your pity party, now it's time to get up and fight." I glared at her through puffy eyes, my voice laced with venom. "Fight what? In case you haven't noticed, I'm blacklisted in this town thanks to the Pembertons." Rather than rising to my bitter sniping, Diane simply crossed her arms and leveled me with a look that could stop traffic. "So get them before they get you. An eye for an eye, Mija." My brow furrowed in confusion until she jerked her chin towards my laptop sitting on the nightstand. "You did your research on the Sutcliffe family, right? For that big proposal you worked on at Kingsley?" Realization began to dawn as I recalled the hundreds of hours I had spent digging into Tristan's family history and business dealings, searching for any potential leverage. At the time, it was all above-board background for a huge corporate acquisition. But now, the memory of all those shady real estate records and offshore bank accounts took on a more sinister possibility. My mind began racing as I pieced together a plan to strike back at the people who had so callously upended my life. "Get dressed," Diane instructed, already heading for the door. "We're going to pay an old friend a visit. It's time to make the Pembertons pay for their arrogance." A feral grin spread across my face as I jumped out of bed, renewed determination coursing through my veins. If they wanted to play dirty, I would show them just how filthy I could get. A few hours later, I found myself sitting across from Tio Miguel, an old family friend who had a complicated history with the underbelly of the city's elite. Despite his gruff exterior, the grizzled ex-con had always treated me with a sort of avuncular affection. "You know I got a soft spot for you, Preciosa," he rasped after I laid out the situation. "But what you're asking?" He shook his head slowly. "That's a lot of heat you're trying to bring down on some heavy hitters." Leaning forward, I locked eyes with him, allowing the full force of my conviction to show. Those bastards took everything from me. My job, my best friend, my entire future. They need to be taught a lesson in respect. Miguel studied me for a long moment before letting out a wheezing chuckle. "Damn, Chica. You got cojones, I'll give you that." He nodded slowly. "All right, I'm in, but I'll need everything you got on this Cabron Sutcliffe and his family's dealings." A triumphant smile tugged at my lips as I reached into my bag and produced a bulging manila envelope, a veritable Pandora's box of evidence, just waiting to be cracked open and unleashed upon my enemies. As Miguel began rifling through the documents, I caught my mother's proud gaze from across the room. She had witnessed my lowest moment, and now she would watch as I rose like a phoenix, ready to rain fire upon those who had tried to destroy me. The Pembertons wanted to make an example out of me? Fine. Two could play at that game. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings, encrypted communications, and poring over financial records late into the night. Tio Miguel's underworld connections had proven invaluable in unearthing even more damning evidence against Tristan and his family's shady business dealings. As the paper trail grew thicker, so did the sense of grim satisfaction coursing through my veins. These people thought they could just discard me like yesterday's garbage, all because I didn't come from money and prestige. Well, they were about to learn a brutal lesson. Karma was a bitch, and her name was Reina Flores. The night everything was finally set in motion, I was a ball of nervous energy. Miguel had instructed me to lay low while he and his crew carried out the operation, but the thought of sitting idly by while they risked exposure was unbearable. "You sure you want to be there for this, Preciosa?" the grizzled ex-con asked, eyeing me skeptically as I paced back and forth. Ain't gonna be pretty when the shades come down. I shot him a look that could have curdled milk. Those pendejos brought this on themselves. I'm not missing a single second of their downfall. Miguel shrugged, seemingly unsurprised by my steely resolve. All right then, let's get this show on the road. My mother insisted on waiting up, her eyes tight with worry as we prepared to leave. Be careful, Mija, she warned, pulling me into a fierce hug. And for God's sake, don't do anything crazy that'll land you in jail. Don't worry, Ma, I assured her with a confident smile. I'm just the messenger. As Miguel's battered pickup truck rumbled through the deserted streets towards the city center, I could feel the adrenaline thrumming through my body. This was it. The moment of reckoning I had been craving ever since Bianca's vicious betrayal. We pulled up in an alley across the street from Sutcliffe Towers, the opulent high-rise that housed Tristan's family's corporate offices and residence. A series of terse, coded messages were exchanged via encrypted apps, and then we waited with bated breath. Suddenly, every exterior light in the building winked out in perfect synchronicity, leaving the once gleaming facade plunged into inky darkness. A tense silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before the crimson glow of the emergency backup lights bathed the streets in an ominous scarlet hue. That was our cue. Miguel gave a sharp nod, and a rugged-looking guy I hadn't met before popped the truck's rear hatch, revealing an industrial-grade digital projector rig with enough output to beam images onto the side of a skyscraper. As the projectors roared to life, I felt Miguel's calloused hand clamp down on my shoulder in a steadying grip. Last chance to back out, Chica. My jaw was set in a hard line as I shook my head, never tearing my eyes away from the rapidly unfurling scene playing out on the black monolith of Sutcliffe Towers. The first image was a high-resolution copy of a property deed, the first in a damning chain linking Tristan and his father directly to an elaborate real estate fraud scheme spanning multiple states. As it dissolved into a bank statement revealing 7-figure wire transfers from an offshore shell company, I could practically hear the jaws dropping inside the building. Over the next half hour, a relentless barrage of evidence flooded the projector's beams. Documents, emails, bank records, all meticulously cultivated from the deepest trenches of the Sutcliffe family's web of deceit. Each new revelation was like a scorching poker to the eye, searing away any plausible deniability. By the time it reached its jaw-dropping crescendo, a crystal-clear video of Tristan himself engaged in a heated argument over laundering money for the Valdez drug cartel, chaos had undoubtedly erupted inside those opulent walls. I stood transfixed, drinking in every moment of their desperate unraveling like an elixir for my wounded soul. As the final damning frame flashed across the projector, Miguel's voice crackled in my ear. That's a wrap, Preciosa. Time to make our exit. As we piled back into the truck, I caught a glimpse of uniformed figures spilling out of the main entrance, their movements frantic and voices raised in shrill panic. A tiny, vindicated smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as we peeled away into the night. In one perfectly executed strike, the entire Sutcliffe empire had imploded from the inside out. And at the epicenter of that blast radius was Tristan himself, exposed as a criminal fraud of the highest order. My revenge was complete, but the true victory was the freedom I had reclaimed. No more shackles of self-doubt, no more oppressive weight of their judgment. I was reborn, and the path ahead belonged solely to me. In the aftermath of my takedown of the Sutcliffe empire, the city was abuzz with speculation and scandal. News trucks swarmed outside the Pemberton estate like vultures, desperate for any morsel of information about the stunning downfall of one of our most prominent families. As for me, I remained blissfully anonymous, a ghost operating in the shadows, content to let the fallout rain down without getting caught in the crosshairs myself. Tio Miguel had warned me to keep a low profile until the dust settled. "You stirred up a real viper's nest with this one, Preciosa," he cautioned in his trademark gravelly drawl. "Best let things cool off before that pendejo Sutcliffe starts sniffing around for vengeance." Part of me bristled at the implication that I should cower in fear after defeating my tormentors so decisively. But the wiser part knew Miguel spoke the truth. Men like Tristan, raised with a profound sense of entitlement and impunity, were at their most dangerous when backed into a corner. So I bided my time, catching the frenzy of breaking news coverage from the safety of my modest apartment. It was almost comical, watching the pundits and high society vultures pick over the smoldering remains of the Sutcliffe legacy like carrion. Tristan's once bright future had gone up in flames alongside his family's ill-gotten riches and prestigious standing. The wedding of the year was officially cancelled as Bianca entered full meltdown mode, her matrimonial dreams dashed by the catastrophic revelation of her fiancé's criminal empire. As for me, the sting of their betrayal had finally begun to dull, allowing me to process the traumatic upheaval with a renewed sense of clarity and determination. If nothing else, the entire sordid affair had stripped away the final blinders of naivete regarding the true nature of the elite. My mother's words from that fateful night after the wedding echoed in my mind. Sometimes we have to prune the dead branches to allow new growth, Mija. Bianca and Tristan had been twisted, toxic offshoots choking the life out of my potential, but now they had been permanently severed. It was a process of addition by subtraction, liberating me from the crushing weight of their judgment and scorn. As the media frenzy began to die down a few weeks later, I found myself filled with a renewed sense of purpose and ambition. If the Sutcliffe downfall had shown me anything, it was the cold hard truth that wealth and status were no safeguards against corruption and moral bankruptcy. For too long, I had subconsciously deferred to the privileged class, granting them an unearned credibility simply by virtue of their opulent lifestyles. Well, no more. The blinders were off, and I could see the game for what it truly was, a cutthroat race to accumulate power and assets by any means necessary. And if I was going to thrive and create a real legacy, I would need to adapt and fight fire with fire. It was this realization that prompted me to finally dust off my neglected laptop and resume job hunting with a vengeance. No longer would I settle for being a disposable cog, constantly walking on eggshells to appease those born into privilege. My first step back into the professional world came in the form of an interview with an upstart tech firm looking to poach top talent from the stodgier, more established companies. From the moment I walked through their doors, I could sense a palpable shift in the air. These were hungry strivers, brimming with ambition and a disdain for the old money elitism that had ground me down for so long. When the CEO, a self-made millennial firebrand, looked me dead in the eye and asked why they should take a chance on me after the Pemberton scandal, I didn't flinch or make excuses. Because I'm a fighter who won't back down or compromise my values to appease those with unchecked privilege and power, I stated with conviction. I took on one of the wealthiest, most influential families in this city and emerged victorious by sheer force of will. Imagine what I could do for a company that actually has my back. The words hung in the air, equal parts bold proclamation and solemn vow. After a tense beat, the CEO cracked the faintest of smiles and extended his hand. Well, I do love a person who's direct. Welcome to the team, Raina. As I shook his hand, firming my grip to match his, I felt a surge of exhilaration and optimism for the first time in ages. This was a new battlefield, one where grit and determination were valued over pedigree and old money. And this time I wasn't going in alone. This time I had the wind at my back. Bianca and Tristan's world may have crumbled to dust, but from those ashes, I was rising again, stronger, wiser, and utterly unstoppable.